Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined by the beautiful Kat Voleur. Kat, how you doing today?
Doing good, doing better.
Well, I am certainly happy to have you here. But before we talk about why you are here, Kat, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit. Kat is the author of Revenge Arc and a full-time horror journalist, as well as the co-host of the Slasher Radio podcast and a founding member of the Sinister Scoop. Now, that's a lot of things rolled up for just one person to try to do. So let's start off with Revenge Arc. What can you tell people a little bit about Revenge Arc if they don't know about that?
Revenge Arc is my debut book. It is being released through Archive of the Odd. It is coming out August 1st, but is available for pre-order right now through archiveoftheodd.com. You can also find the pre-order link through my website, catvalor.com. And it's a found file horror novella just about toxic fandom culture and the deep web, and it's exciting.
Well, the good thing is you don't have to remember all the links that she just said because I conveniently have all of those down in the description for you. So that way you can follow her, you can order the book, and you can be a part of all this as well. And let's talk about Slasher Radio podcast. What do you guys do over at Slasher Radio?
We're a movie of the week podcast. Usually, sometimes we do events. We just recently finished our March Madness equivalent, where we pit up a bunch of movies against each other for a bracket. We're coming off of that. We talk a lot about horror movies. We cover horror news, and it's a ton of fun.
So who won your March Madness bracket?
So this theme, we did originals versus remakes. And the reigning champion was, of course, an original. It was the original A Nightmare on Elm Street.
I've always said Psycho and A Nightmare on Elm Street are the closest to perfect horror movies that you can get. If you take out the ending of both of those movies, they're perfect. I hate the ending of A Nightmare on Elm Street with the blow up doll mom and fucking Freddy car. I hate the ending of Psycho where you have this serial killer Norman Bates that gets taken down by slightly raising his right arm and falling down. Those are things, like I said, perfect movies. I love both those movies, and both those movies hit me in the feels and they give me adrenaline, and I love them both. And then you have like just the third act, and I'm like, oh, come on, like what happened here? So
Yeah.
you brought it up, so I
I did.
ask, what was your opinion on the Nightmare on Elm Street remake?
Oh God, I didn't like the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. I I appreciate what they were trying to do. And I think there were a couple elements that were really cool. Everyone complains about it incessantly. And I understand, because I was there, I was at the theater, I was disappointed, I had that same experience. But I think once you take the fun out of Freddy, it could be anyone. You know what I mean? Like,
And I'm in this boat where this is going to be a hot take. And people that watch this, that are continuous watchers, know what I'm about to say. I think that Jackie Earle Haley played Freddy Krueger better than Robert Englund did. Now, here's what I mean by that. With Robert Englund, we love him. Like, he's so good and we love him so much. He's a child rapist and a child killer. We're not supposed to like him. We are supposed to hate him. When he's on the screen, we're supposed to think he's vile and disgusting and putrid. And that's what we felt with Jackie Earle Haley. Every time we seen him and he was, what do you want to play? Fuck you. Sounds like fun. We were like, oh, stop it. Get the fuck out of here. You're disgusting. We hated him. And we were supposed to. He did what the job given to him was. So while I think Robert Englund is my Freddy and he's perfect and I love him to death, when it comes to playing a demented, burned up child rapist / killer, Jackie Earle Haley made me hate him like I'm supposed to. So
I would argue, and I get into the we have the was Freddy a child molester conversation a lot on the show, because the answer is obviously yes. We have one host that just is like, that was never confirmed in the original movies, and we end up fighting about it a lot. So I kind of have, I feel like I pre-prepared points for this. I do think The one thing I will say about Robert Englund's Freddy, and I get into this a little bit sometimes with Pennywise also, is that I think the original Freddy Krueger, Robert Englund, I think he's scarier because there is that sense of appeal. Like, you have to wonder watching the remake, it's like, why were kids ever around this dude? He's creepy. But with Freddy, you can, like, with Freddy, with Robert Englund, you can kind of see it because he's fun and he's engaging. And then, the fact that he allegedly did all
Right.
these things, makes it that
I
much.
think that well, especially with Robert Englund's, like you said, they never really confirm it, but there is a deleted scene from the first film where they talk about what Robert did to Nancy's brother. That's why it's so close to home with this family. And like I said, while it's never explicitly said, I think it's
We
always
know.
hinted at.
Yeah.
Well, just like in the remake. In the remake, it's never explicitly said that he killed any kids. It's just that he was a
Yeah.
child molester. So my big problem with the remake is they didn't take enough chances with the remake. They stayed pretty carbon copy to what the original did. And for me, when I look for a remake, I want something that takes its chances. The Thing went way out of the way. Evil Dead 2013 went way out of the way of what the original did. Child's Play 2019, Night of the Living Dead 1990. These are all movies that took big swings when they did their remake. They didn't just stay carbon copy of the original, but that's not what we're here for. We're not here to talk about Nightmare on Elm Street. But before we get back into why we're here, the Sinister Scoop, another thing that you
Yes.
do as well. What can you tell me a little bit about the Sinister Scoop?
The Sinister Scoop, I was recently promoted to co-founder. It is a website for horror news, for horror creatives. We have artists, we have writers. We just have a bunch of resources for people. We're still putting it together. And it was one of those things. I was there when it was started, and I was the one that wanted to play around with the website. So, um, but it's I work on it with Tasha Reynolds. We just try to support horror creatives, and it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And again, guys, you can check all this out by clicking the links down in the description. You can be a part of this. You can check out the website, follow her on social media, stay up to date on everything that they have coming up in the future. But we know what you are doing in the future. You're with the podcast and the website. We know what you're doing right now. But here for a little bit, Kat, I would like to go back to the past and talk
Yeah,
about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And Kat, the first horror movie that you watched was
it was the 1997 Canadian horror film Cube.
And I can honestly say this is the first time I've talked about this movie on this podcast. And
Oh,
yeah, I had never heard of this movie. And a buddy of mine named Derek, he came to me one day with like with a USB stick. That's how long ago this was. And he was like, "Bro, I got this movie you got to check out." And I watched it, and I was just like, "Wow, this is really good." Until we were talking earlier about endings. Um,
yeah,
but I honestly believe if you're a fan of the Saw franchise, it takes a lot of what Cube did, and
yeah.
Saw incorporates a lot of that into its franchise. So, do you remember how old you were the first time you had seen it, Kat?
I do. I'm gonna be telling on myself a little bit here. I was 6 when I saw Cube for the first time. It's probably why I am the way that I am. I'm a big fan of the Saw franchise. And yeah, I do think Cube, it was a precursor
Mhm.
to a lot of the whole torture porn era of like it was ahead of its time. We also have like the very specific subgenre of like high speculative death trap thing. We've got like
Yeah,
Circle and the Platform, and like Cube was decades ahead of all of that.
right.
I'm always really impressed with Cube, but it was my mom said so they were playing it on the Sci-Fi Network, and my mom stepped out of the room to take a phone call, and my uncle was watching Cube, and he just never even noticed that I just like crept on in there and was like, "What's this?" um
At this moment, your mom's calling your uncle like, "You son of a bitch! I knew it. I knew it
yeah,
was
I
you."
know. Yeah, she was not so pleased. She came in like toward the end of the movie and she was just like horrified, but at that point she was like the damage has probably been done,
Right.
like if she wants to finish it. Um if she wants to watch those last 20 minutes, but and that's like it's the movie that I credit. I grew up kind of with like Universal monster movies and stuff just being
Sure.
like on in the house, but the first one I remember there was like Cube, something clicked in my brain where it was like, I don't know if I should be watching this, but I want to watch more of it. Like,
Well, and it's one of those movies that, like I said, it really, and you said it best. It was way ahead of its time, because like it had, like you said, like that torture porn esque, a bunch of people trapped in a place, not knowing how they got there, trying to figure out what they have to do to get out while they're getting picked off one by one. Um, but it also uses savant syndrome and autism as a big part of the film too, which I think is, anybody that knows me, is something very, very, very close to home for me and my family. And so you go back and you watch this movie and you're just blown away by how ahead of its time it really, really was. And it is not lacking in the death department, it is not lacking in the crazy scenes department. But which scene would you say it was that affected you the most?
I would definitely say it was the opening scene. The where the first man gets cubed.
I was
Um,
thinking the cubed.
it's so dramatic, because you see the blood running down his face at first, and you don't know, like you heard the sound, you thought something terrible happened, he's standing still, you're waiting, the blood starts dripping, and you like don't know what's going on, and then you see the squares just kind of start to fall out of him, and it's like, oh my God.
Yeah. And it's even crazier because we're always in horror attuned to give me something in the first act that's going to hook me,
Yeah.
and you have that, like I said, Scream, Black Christmas, When a Stranger Calls. These movies could be their own short film, and you have Cube that just comes out and punches you right in the mouth in the opening, like the cubing of the gentleman at the beginning. So I was wondering if that was going to be one of them, because when you first turn this movie on, you're hooked
Yeah.
right away. In the first 10 minutes, you're like, okay, Cube, I see you. What you got for me? But like I said a minute ago, this does not have a shortage of deaths or cool looking deaths throughout the film. Now, we know that the opening really affected you, but what death would you say stuck with you the most throughout the film?
I think the one that it actually wasn't a death. It's funny. I think the one that affected me most was the one that didn't kill anybody, but the sound activated room with the blades. Like
Yeah.
that just freaked me out for the longest time. Especially because at that point, you kind of thought that you knew the rules and like how the cubes worked, and then there's this one that just works in a different way, and it's like, oh
Right.
no.
Right.
There's
And
that piece of
I love
dread.
even at the beginning, when you have like, well, let me throw my boot in here and see what happens, and then you get, like you think, like you just said, you think you start to know the rules and you think that you have certain things established. And it's like, April Fools. Um, so at the time of filming, we have had three Cube movies. We've had a sequel, we've had a prequel. In 2021, they did a Japanese remake called Cube as well. And they are in production of Cubed, which is a remake of the original Cube. Now, is the original Cube your favorite in the franchise?
Oh, by far.
Okay, I thought so.
uh
But I always ask people, would you like to see your first horror movie remade? And since it is something that is in production at the moment, is that something that you're excited for?
so I I was really excited for the Japanese remake until I saw it, which I had a lot of fun with it. And I think it did some things really well, but it did kind of lower my excitement. I think that a lot of the themes in Cube, because we keep saying it, but like it was ahead of its time. And I think there are things
Yep.
in the original, like the neurodivergence, the police brutality, the, uh, creepy gaze of suspiciously young women. Like, there are a lot of really relevant cultural things that I think we could hit on harder in a remake. I don't trust that we would, and that makes me really nervous, you know.
Well, and you even have attempted sexual assault in the first
Yeah.
one, like you said, on top of all these other, politically motivated things that you put in films. And something I've always said, and Ashley's always said as well, my wife, we love it when a horror movie has a message, but it's a horror movie first. But it
Yeah.
does touch on social issues. And that's something with Cube. You do have these social issues throughout the film, but it doesn't beat you over the head with it. It doesn't
Right.
shove it down your throat. You're able to enjoy the film as a horror film as well. So, do you think you'll be checking out Cubed if we do actually get the film?
Oh, I'll be there opening day for Cubed, but but my hopes aren't high.
Right. Cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
So we've talked about Cube being your first horror movie and what this movie means to you. But now I want to throw you a little bit of a curveball here for a second. My
Okay.
buddy Ghostface is here, and he has a question for you.
Okay.
What's your favorite scary movie, Kat? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
So usually I have an answer ready for this. 2022 kind of threw my world into chaos because there were a lot of movies that I was seeing for the first time that were making their way into my very like laminated, set in stone top 10. And I believe my favorite movie of all time, my favorite, not even horror movie, just my favorite movie of all time is The Cabin in the Woods. But
Very nice choice.
X is really close, and I've been struggling with that since I saw X in theater, because it's like it makes me a little bit uncomfortable because it's been Cabin in the Woods has been out for like over a decade now. It's been my favorite movie of all time for
Oh
like a
yeah.
third of my life, and now suddenly X is creeping along, and it's like, oh no.
See,
But
and Cabin in the Woods is one of those films that, again, people that know me know I love Cabin in the Woods. That movie blew me away when I watched it with how intelligent it was, the practical effects, just the pure intelligence that comes along with the film. And Sinister and Hadley are two of my favorite side characters in all of horror movie history. The comedic genius that those two bring to that film.
I'm still on speakerphone, aren't I? Oh my God, Mordecai! I can't believe it. It did it again.
Even when there's like in the background or their dance moves or whatever have you, like Sitterson and Hadley are just like I said, some of my favorite horror side characters of all time. They're perfect side characters, and they've always made me want to see a merman. But I understand what you're saying with X too, because X comes along, and I'm going to sound so geriatric and so old right now, but X comes along and it's a hip horror movie. Like, it takes you back to the 70s and what we experienced with Texas Chainsaw Massacre when that came out, and the grittiness and the dirtiness of it. But it does have a polished up appeal to it as well, and it's scary. The acting is just fucking phenomenal. We've got Kid Cudi hanging dong, which is so amazing. I was so happy we finally got some dong hangage in a good horror movie. I support the dong hangage. And then it's such a beautifully shot movie, and it's part of this trilogy that I'm so excited for the finale of with Maxine.
I can't wait for Maxine.
All the things I've heard, all the things I've seen, and some of the, they've got Kevin Bacon to come along and join on to it now. Like, I'm just very, very excited to see where we go in the finale of this trilogy, because Pearl, as much as I loved X, I think X is a better horror movie. Pearl is one of the best character studies I've ever seen in my entire life. And her monologue at the end at the kitchen table with that long, unbroken shot is one of my favorite shots of any horror movie ever. It's just that, 7-minute unbroken monologue of Mia Goth just completely destroying it. And oh man, like in the theater, I was like, when are they going to break the shot? When are they going to switch camera view? But and she just kept going and going. And like, I got little emo goosebumps right now with just how thinking about how perfect that scene was shot. And I'm glad you're showing a lot of love to X, because even the foreshadowing of X is so fucking phenomenal.
It's so good. You know how everyone is gonna die. Like they
You
tie
you see her with the
everything back
crocodile at the
around.
beginning.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's perfect. X is and X also feels like it was very X feels almost like it was made for me. There are a lot of like little things that I have a tough time finding in horror movies that just like
Yeah.
if you laid them all out, it would be the plot of X. Like I do like that very cyclical storytelling. I love the avant-garde like early French editing style. Um and I loved the 70s grindhouse era of horror, and my all-time favorite thing, and this is so specific, but I love movies where ballerinas just fucking snap. And when I found out that Pearl used to be a dancer, it was like, oh, it makes so much sense.
Like,
Like
thank you for coming into my head and taking these ideas and putting them onto film. I really appreciate you doing that for me.
that's what it felt like Ty West had done. And I remember it was so funny looking back at this. Because I went to the movies. St. Patrick's Day was the release for X. And usually I do like a big St. Patrick's Day like pub crawl thing.
Yeah.
And I remember I took off that year because it was like Uma came out that day and X came out that day. And I specifically saw Uma first because I was looking at the trailers and I was weighing my options, and it's like X looks really good, but it also looks like really silly and ridiculous. And I'm gonna go watch the serious movie and then I'm gonna go get drunk during X. And I remember just like sitting down in the theater with my beer, like I'm ready to get gone, and then like I don't even think I touched it. I was so focused on this
Right.
movie. And it's so funny
And see,
looking
I had
back and
never
being like, I can't believe I think I'm gonna like Uma more than X. Like
and I had never even watched a trailer for X. I was completely blind when we went into
oh,
the theater,
wow.
and we took a friend of ours, Anna, sweet Anna. What a Ghoul Wants. We met up with her, and like we met halfway, like a 3 hour drive, and we all went and watched X together. And I was like, wow, this is quite the movie to bring a friend along to watch with. Like, love you, Anna. But it's one of those movies that I really think really helped to kickstart the slasher craze again.
Yeah.
Horror always moves in cycles, and here in 2023, I think we're going to get a lot more of the psychological horror back in. Like we're getting the new Exorcist film, the new Insidious film, the Boogeyman from Stephen King. The slasher thing is going to die down a little bit, and we'll go back to supernatural horror, and then but I think X really did help to kickstart bringing that slasher craze back in. So I love you for that, X. But
Yeah.
now, real quick before I let you go, Kat, I do want to bounce back to Cube, and what we're going to do here is we're going to rank this movie on a skull count. Now, we're not
Okay.
ranking Cube on acting, production, direction, nothing like that. We're not being critics. What we're doing here is strictly ranking Cube on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. A Cat, what would your ranking of Cube be?
Uh so I want to preface this by saying I'm usually very conservative at talking about like how much movies affected me, and then I'm immediately going to give it the full 5 skulls. This was the movie that affected me. It got me into horror. It made me really paranoid for a little while because of how young I was when I watched it. I started paying attention in my math classes a lot more because like I was worried I'd
Prime
have to know
numbers,
what a
prime
prime
numbers, prime
number
numbers.
was. Like this movie had a huge impact on me. So I think
It's
probably more
it's
than
like I said,
any other horror movie.
and I've said this a lot. I think there's been one perfect movie ever made, and that's Pee-wee's Big Adventure. That's the only movie to me that is just like, this is the perfect fucking movie. Beavis and Butthead Do America is up there. Back to the Future is up there. Psycho and Nightmare on Elm Street. But when it comes to how movies have affected me, House from 1986, that was my first horror movie. That gets a 5 skull. Like, without that movie, I'm not doing this today. I can say that with 100% certainty. Sledgehammer Horror does not exist without House 1986. Cabin in the Woods is one I'd give a 5 because that's one of those movies that I'm one of those geriatric get off my lawn guys that's like, don't clap at a fucking movie. They can't hear you. At the end of Cabin in the Woods, I was secretly like, like that blew me away. I went into it looking for the most cliche, lame movie I've ever seen, and I was blown away at the intelligence and just pure amazing effects of that movie. And then recently, 2022's or 2020's The Dark and the Wicked. That movie scared the shit out of me. Like, it scared me. So I get what you're saying, because I'm usually really conservative too. Like, I'm one of those guys that nitpicks to the point where I point out a fucking Freddy car or a blow up down. Like, that's how nitpicky I get. So I understand what you're saying, but I did say this at the top, guys, and I'm going to say it again because we're at the end of the third act. The credits are about to roll and the curtain is about to drop. But before that happens, all of Kat's social media links and links to all the amazing things that she's working on are all down in the description. So make sure you're clicking those, following her, and staying up to date on everything she has coming up. Kat, please don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you.
Okay.
Everybody else, as always, if you haven't already, please make sure you like and subscribe. It really does help the channel more than you know. And follow Sledgehammer Horror on social media. We'd love to have you along as well. And until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.